Why am I so passionate about car design? What is it that makes it take up so much time and energy discussing it, analyzing it, and sharing it with you guys? For most people, cars are just that. They're cars. They're a vessel to take you from one place to another as conveniently as possible. But for me, though, cars are so much more than that. They're an extension of who you are. They are pieces of art on wheels. Now I remember when I was a kid, I used to think it was so cool to see cars on the highway cruising by doing 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. It was like beautiful capsules containing life. A stream of red lights fading away into the night, transporting you to the next step in your journey, whatever that may be, quietly, quickly, comfortably, and safely. The car takes care of you as long as you take care of the car. So we're building a relationship with our cars. Now, when it comes to car design, I feel it's been lacking in recent years. Manufacturers seems to be confused about what they want to create. They're scrambling to come out with something new, and instead, cars are losing their souls, with the line between car design and industrial design becoming more and more blurred. However, the answer has always been right in front of us. All we have to do is combine the beauty and shapes in nature that's been carved by the wind and the ocean over thousands of years, or animals whose shape has evolved to cut through the wind and water. Those shapes are actually the definition of timeless shapes, because the more time passes, the more defined and efficient that shape becomes. It's like cheating on a test. We already know the answers to what is universally considered to be a beautiful shape. Now the problem is translating this into a car design isn't easy, because there are a ton of regulations and rules that manufacturers need to abide by. Safety features, product requirement, of course, branding and identity of whatever specific brand you're working with. And that's what I want to talk to you today about, the new concept from Genesis, the Genesis X. Now, when the first concept in this shape or with this form came out in 2018, it was called the Genesis Essentia, and I loved everything about that car. I mean, if you want to talk good proportions, that car and that concept just had absolutely the correct proportions to me. And proportions means that everything works well together. The hood works with the greenhouse works with the tail, the wheelbase, the wheels itself look like it's hugging the road. So when this came out, the Genesis X, it has the same kind of vibe to it, and it's a super strong identity. You immediately realize that this is a Genesis, not just by the proportions, but what I've been saying for a very long time, that the more car designers and manufacturers are doing is they're taking a simple design. They're going back to what we talked about before, the universally beautiful shapes that are timeless, that we've seen throughout the ages, from the 250 GTO, the Toyota 2000 GT, and they take those elements, but they apply modern graphics and identifiers of the brand onto these shapes. And in the case of the Genesis here, we have this two-line design feature that we have all around this car. And what I love about this design is the proportions, and in combination with the graphics, create a very strong identity. So let's just have a look at this car here from a 3/4 rear view. Let me show you exactly what I mean. So this is the beautiful Genesis X here. Beautiful design. I hope I can see this in real life at some point. I love everything about it. There's just one single little thing that I would like to change on it, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute when we talk about the side view. But let's have a look at the rear. It's very simple. There's nothing crazy going on. There's not a lot of styling features, not a lot of lines like we have Hyundai doing right now, which is fine because they're a South Korean brand and that's in their DNA. But here it's very stripped down, and we have these lines, this two-line design that we have going across the entire car in the same level. So if you were to wrap a ribbon around this car, it would hit all of these markers that you have already located around the car and illuminated as well. So it's like it's a shell on top of these two lines that underneath you can it kind of gives you the sense that these lines are connected all around the car. It's just covered by the body panels on some parts, and then it pops up in the rear end and in the front and on the side on some places, which is a very cool feature that I don't think I've seen this before on any other car, that you have the same lines connecting the front light and the rear lights in the exact same level as well. And we have this concave surface right here in which these lines sits, and this concave surface, it creates this beautiful looking ellipse right here which the graphics sit within. And then of course we have the beautiful wheels, very simple, very elegant, nothing too fancy about the wheels. 5-spoke, a little bit turbine looking. I like that because it's electric. It kind of has that resemblance that it is electric, maybe a wind turbine or something like that for the wheels. So let's have a look at some front features and almost a side view here. We have this long sweeping shoulder that goes from the rear and stretches all the way to the front end right here. And of course these lines here that cut through the body of the car and into the rear, 2 parallel lines. And then we have almost like an Art Deco style grille in the front right here, which breaks up the otherwise very parallel and horizontal lines, and it creates a feature in the front that's just it's interesting to look at because it's so different, and specifically how it goes down into this air intake right here and cuts this line with the tip of this front grille. Very interesting design. And of course you have the 2 lines, you have that connecting on other parts of the car. For example, right here in the C-pillar, it's a small little design feature, but I think it makes a huge difference, because touches like this one and touches like this little tip that cuts into the line there, these are small things, but they make the design more interesting. It makes it imperfect. If we were to remove this, it would be a perfect glass surface right here. It would look good, but it wouldn't be as interesting as if you were to add something like this or something like this in the front to just break up the perfectness of the lines and the design of this car. And here we can see it even better. Just look at this beautiful shoulder line here. And I think the rear end of this car right here, the dip, the fact that it doesn't have a shoulder that goes up like this, it reminds me of some cars that I can't put my finger on what cars they are. I think they're British. I think I'm thinking of the old XJ, where they have this sloping line, or maybe Rolls-Royce or something like that, but even lower than that. They have a line that goes from the front and then dips slowly all the way down to the back, and not a too strong of a muscle over the rear end. And this creates a motion in the design, specifically when you look at it from the front view. And I just want to point out this little detail here again, that you have the tip of this grille cutting in to both of these lines. So we don't have 2 continuous lines here. It's broken by this massive identifying graphic feature, which is the grille of the car, to cut it up and make the design more interesting. So let's have a look at the side view here and what I wanted to change. If we have a look at the side view here, for example, I just want to show you one thing first before we change it, and that is the lines that I'm talking about. So let's see if we have a line here, and then we just make this into a red line, and you can see that the graphics of the car, they are in line with each other. If you talk about line flow, for example, you have a clear line flow going on right here with the graphic features of the car. We can duplicate this line as well, and then we have 2 parallel lines, and that is the lights that are all around the car. And on top of that, we have a very clean, this sloping shoulder line I was talking about. We can see it here even more clearly. It's a beautiful looking thing right here. You see it starts here, and then the top, the highest point of the shoulder is somewhere around here, I would say. And then it dips down. The further back we go, the more it dips. If I can hit it correctly with my pen here, something like this. And it creates this part right here. You can see just how short this height is between the wheel and the actual window of the car. And this is very unusual. Usually what happens when they create a car like this, so what happens is this is often raised up, something like this. This is the typical traditional 2-door sports car coupe rear fender. Add some more muscle to this rear end, even more than this, but I don't want to mess it up too much. I want to still have it look like it could be a regular model without messing too much with it. But that's usually what happens when you create a car like this. But what I really like about what Genesis did here is that they kept the slope. It's tempting to add more muscle to the rear fenders, but I'm glad that they didn't. It gives this forward motion because you have most of the mass right here, and then the mass is this part right here. It becomes more sleek the further back you go. So it's almost like a drop shape design to this car. And of course, if we look at the greenhouse here, it connects beautifully with the rear end as well. It really flows and melts into the rear right here. There's no sharp connection to the rear end. It kind of flows in to everything else, and that creates this slick, almost slippery surface when you look at it from a side view like this. But as I said, there's one little tiny thing that if I could change anything on this car, it would be this, and that is if we look at the overhangs of this car. We have the rear overhang right here, and then we have the same kind of overhang in the front here. So what I want to do, I think these two overhangs, they're too similar to each other. And we have two options to do this, but since this is it's an electric car, I can see why they did it. And usually this wheel would be maybe a couple of inches moved this way, so we have the center of the wheel be somewhere around here. But since it's an electric car, we can maximize the space inside. We don't need all the space for the internal parts, the transmission, engine, and so on, which means that we move out the wheels further in the corners of the car. But what this does to this design, I think, is that it creates the front overhang is too similar to the rear overhang, and I want to have more of a movement forward. And how we do that is we reduce the front overhang by just a couple of inches. So let me show you what that's going to look like. If we just go in here and carefully just liquefy, push this in just a little bit, not too much. I still want to have it be a significant overhang just because we can use the space since it's an EV, but not as much as we have on the concept right now. So let's have a look at this, and then we do before and after, and you can see how it looks. So this is the before right here, and this is the after. So it's a matter of maybe 2 or 3 inches, just bring the front end a little bit. So this overhang right here that we have here doesn't compete with the length of the overhang right here. I want this overhang to be way shorter than this, at least visually, so you can visually see that that's the front and that is the rear. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with the Genesis X. It gives me hope for the future. This is like exactly what I want to see from car manufacturers today, is bringing back to the natural beauty of what car design could be. And you get that, but as I said, looking at nature, looking at what timeless designs we have throughout history, and then taking those, we can modernize those shapes a little bit, but the proportion still needs to be, they're never going to change. What is considered universally beautiful, it's never going to change. It's always going to be the same, but what we can play around with to create some identity in the cars is the graphic features of the car. And this is just a perfect example of this. It has everything. It has everything that I want in a brand new car. It has the proportions. It has the super strong brand identity with the lights and the grille. And of course, it has the stance and the plantedness of a sports car. And I'm really happy to see that this is the direction the Genesis is going. Now, I would love to see this in real life, but more than that, I want to see this go into production. I'm going to hope they do it. I doubt it would look exactly like this, but the thing is, recently, when we've seen concepts that are electric, the production versions of the electric cars seems to be very, very close to the concepts. A lot closer than if you have an internal combustion concept, such as, for example, the Supra, the FT1, and then you get the Supra, which is totally different in everything, proportions, graphics, and it's just a totally different car. But recently, we've seen EV concepts go into production and look almost exactly like the concept itself. So I hope that's the case with the Genesis X right here, because if this comes out, I'm selling my Tesla and I'm buying this for sure. Thank you so much for watching on the Sketch Monkey. Take care, and I will see you in the next video.